Washoe County Library System welcomes you to our monthly series from the Nevada Historical Society, presents High Noon with Neal Cobb. This afternoon's topic is about the Pony Express in Nevada with Sam Macaluso. My name is Samantha, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. Washoe County Library System and Nevada Historical Society will feature a different topic and speaker the third Thursday of every month through April. Next month's topic is Chamber of Commerce lecture by Joyce Cox. This will be Thursday, February 18th at 12 p.m. To sign up, be sure you go to events.washoecountylibrary.us. And now I would like to introduce you to Sherry Hayes Zorn with the Nevada Historical Society. Again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you everybody for joining us today for our wonderful High Noon series, Shootout with Neal Cobb. Neal is our honorary curator of history and longtime supporter of the Nevada Historical Society. And so he's been wonderful trying to help us find great speakers on fascinating topics that represent all things Nevada. So as Samantha mentioned, I'm Sherry and I work at the Nevada Historical Society. And if you would like to see other programs, you can visit our website, like Samantha said, nvhistoricalsociety.org. And we have a lot of videos of these talks online, so please check it out. So without further ado, let me introduce Neal Cobb, who is our host today. Neal.
Thank you, Sherry. Our featured speaker today is Mr. Sam Macaluso. As a native Nevadan, Sam was born and raised in the Reno-Sparks area. He has had 3 careers: a banker, a teacher, and a Nevada Air National Guardsman. Sam earned his degree at the University of Nevada in history and science, and Nevada history has always been his passion. Sam Macaluso is a retired teacher with the Washoe County School District, having taught from 1990 to 2005. He was an elementary teacher and taught the third through the 6th grades. His favorite grade was the 4th grade, so he could focus on Nevada history and mining in Nevada. In 1990, he created a persona of Sagebrush Sam, the oldest living miner in Nevada. He began going to classes as an old Nevada storyteller. Sagebrush Sam has taught students about gold, how to pan gold, and told stories about Nevada. He is a Nevada historian and has many stories to tell about Nevada. Sam has presented for the OLLI, which is Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and other occasions. It is my pleasure to introduce Sagebrush Sam.
Yeah, well, hello, everybody. Only today I'm Pony Express rider Sam. And I am dressed up in what the Pony Express rider would look like in 1860. But we will talk a little bit about that as we get into this program a little later. Now, one of the things this talk is kind of the one I do for my 4th grade students when I go into a classroom. This is the shorter version. The longer version is about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and I didn't think you wanted to sit through all that. So I took the shorter version, and here it goes. Now, I tell my class, if you were in Virginia City in 1860 and you wanted to send a Christmas card to a friend of yours, say in Pennsylvania, you would have to send that Christmas card by Halloween for it to get to Pennsylvania by Christmas, because it took 6 to 8 weeks for mail to get from one end of the country to the other end of the country. And so consequently, a faster system had to be developed. And this faster system became what we know as the Pony Express. And basically, the Pony Express was nothing more than a relay system of horses that traveled across the country from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. distance of about 2,000 miles, and the average time it took was about 10 days. Now, it's kind of interesting because this is nothing new. A relay system like this was nothing new. As a matter of fact, in the 13th century in China, when Marco Polo ventured into China, then he saw a relay station then, which he called it a post station. And these post stations were about 25 miles apart, and horses and riders would travel that distance to bring communications through China. So this is something that started in the 1200s. But here, if you wanted to, here in the United States, we needed a faster system. And one of the reasons was in 1850, California became a state. In 1859, Oregon became a state. And so basically, those two states were isolated from the rest of the country because you had all the ones on the eastern side of the Mississippi River and all the states that were there. And then you had these two lone states that were on the far end of the West up against the Pacific Ocean. So how do we get the mail from one place to another? Well, it became the Pony Express. But before you became a Pony Express rider, you had to take this oath of office, which said, I, and then you stated your name, do hereby swear before the great and living God that during my engagement and while I am in the employee of Russell, Majors, and Waddell, I will under no circumstances use profane language, that I will drink no intoxicating liquors, that I will not quarrel or fight with any other employee of the firm, and that in every respect I will conduct myself honestly, be faithful to my duties, and so direct my acts as to win the confidence of my employers, so help me God. And once you took that oath, you could then become a employee of the Pony Express. Okay, so now let's kind of get an idea of who the three men were. These are the three major people that put the Pony Express together. And we'll start with the first one, William Russell. This is William Russell here. And William Russell, he was the senior partner in the firm of Russell, Majors, and Waddell. And in 1860, well, it was actually December of 1859, he met with a Senator Gwynn from California and proposed the idea of a Pony Express, or basically a transit system between the East and the West, where it could deliver the mail. The idea was he wanted to get the mail contract. And so if they could get the mail contract, they would be sitting pretty, because Russell, Majors, and Waddell at the time had a freighting firm. They hauled freight, and they would haul freight to the West Coast from Kansas and Missouri area. And so, they were very well known. They were very rich and could, probably take it on. But Russell was kind of the senior partner. He enjoyed living in, being in the Washington area in New York. He liked fine clothes. He liked a good cigar, good dinner. And he was the one that set up all the deals. And the thing was, is he set a deal up in December of 1859 with the Senator Gwynn that he could start a relay service and have it up and running by April. He comes back, talks to his other two partners, Alexander Majors and William Waddell, and tells them what he's planning on doing. They are kind of hesitant. And, they said, I don't think we can do this. I don't think we can even have it ready by then. And he said, well, I made the commitment. You guys work it out. So he was the guy that set up all the deals, William Russell. Majors, Alexander Majors, was the you might say the guy on the blue collar worker, let's put it that way. He was the one that helped set up all the stations, made sure they were all built, hired all the people. And it wasn't just Pony Express riders. He had to hire freight people because they had to deliver freight to the stations. He bought the horses that they needed. he had to get stations set up and then station managers to run them. So he did all the hiring and all the legwork that had to be done. William Waddell, he was the accountant. He was the guy that paid the bills, and he was the one that kept saying, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. And yet William Russell kept making the deals. So those are the three men that are responsible for the Pony Express. And this is what the Pony Express route looked from April 3rd, 1860 to October 24th, 1861. It started in St. Joseph, Missouri, and ended up in Sacramento. And there were approximately 200 stations in between there. And as far as the number of riders, there was approximately 80 riders. And that's kind of up for discretion because, you know, some people would hire on, maybe make one run, so this is not for me, and then leave, and then they'd have to hire somebody else. But the estimates are there was approximately 80 riders in these 200 stations. Now, it was kind of separated. If you were east of the Rockies, the stations were somewhere between 12 and 15 miles apart, because basically those were in the plains areas. So the land was flat. And the horses that were used in this were thoroughbred horses that could run fast, but didn't have the endurance. And so they might last 10 to 12 miles. And then that was pretty much it. And so then horses would have to be changed at the next station. And that's why the stations were so much closer together in the eastern part of the United States. Now, in the western part of the United States, from the Rocky Mountains west, the stations were farther apart. They were anywhere between 15 to 35 miles apart. And especially when we get to Nevada, in Nevada, they had to be around water supplies, because obviously how are you going to water the horses if you're out in the middle of the desert? It doesn't work that well. So you needed to have at least a source of water in the west. On the western side of the Rockies, they bought what we call a Spanish barb horse. And a Spanish barb is a smaller horse. It was about 800 to 900 pounds. It had one less vertebrae, and it was the endurance horse. Now, in a race, a short race, a thoroughbred would beat a Spanish barb every time. But if that was an endurance race that had to go 15, 20 miles, the Spanish barb would win every time, because it was a stronger horse and could endure the longer ride. And so that's something else that they had to consider when, you know, setting everything up. Okay. What was some of the things that a Pony Express rider had to have? Well, first of all, he was given a pistol. And it was a cap and ball type pistol. This was the common pistol at the time, a Model 51 Navy Colt. Many times they were given two pistols. But one of the things too you had to remember was you wanted speed. You wanted speed and you wanted lightweight. And, you know, the idea was that you wanted a lightweight rider. Riders were anywhere from 11 years old to 45 years old, but they were small in stature. They didn't want anybody that weighed more than about 125 pounds, because again, speed was the requirement here. So getting two pistols like this was something that most riders didn't take. What they did was they took a cylinder out and they kept one pistol and another full loaded cylinder, which gave them the equivalent of 12 shots. So that's something that they had. They were given a Sharps rifle, either a Sharps or a Spencer rifle. And again, many of them basically left them at the station. The riders figured this was too much weight. Now, some of the riders did keep their carbines, but here again, the question I pose to students and the question I'll pose to you, I mean, how are you going to, if you're riding across the countryside on a speeding horse as fast as you can, how can you take one of these out of the scabbard and be able to cock, load, and fire one of these on a full gallop. It just doesn't happen. And so consequently, many of the riders never even carried one of these. Here's something else. They were given a bugle. And the idea of the bugle was so that the rider could signal to the next station when they were coming. Well, you know, within the first month of the Pony Express, the station masters knew when they were coming. They didn't need a bugle. This was extra weight. Most of the riders just tossed the bugles or just left them in the station because it was just an unnecessary item. Another thing, a Bible. Now see, one of the things was that William Waddell, or excuse me, Alexander Majors was a very religious man, and he believed that everyone should carry a Bible. And again, how are you going to read a Bible when you're galloping at full speed across the countryside? So either the Bible was tossed or the Bible was left at the station. And then if the rider had time at the station while he was waiting, you know, to change or whatever the case was, or maybe that was the end of his particular ride and he had some time to wait until the east or westbound rider was coming, he might have time to read the Bible then, but he never read, you know, this was another unnecessary item. The same thing with his Bowie knife, because how many times were there going to be close-end encounters with something with a Pony Express rider? And so extra weight, this is not necessary, not needed. Now, this was the saddle that was used. And the saddle, it was an interesting thing. It was a very lightweight saddle. And all it was stitched leather over a wooden skeleton. And it was very lightweight wood. You know, you didn't want a heavy saddle like you see. It's funny because I've watched a couple of Pony Express movies and here they are with the full heavy duty saddle on there and, you know, the guy's taken off. Young Riders is a really good example of what the Pony Express was not. And if you ever watch, you know, that particular show that was on TV for several years, that's definitely not the Pony Express. But anyway, this was the saddle that they had, very lightweight saddle. And then this is the mochia. This is where the mail was kept. And this went over the saddle and you rode on that. As you can see, they call these canisters. And there were 4 of them, 2 on either side. 3 of them were locked. And in St. Joseph, Missouri, they would be locked. And the only person that had the key was the attendant in Sacramento. And in Sacramento, 3 of them were locked. And the only person that had the key was in St. Joseph, Missouri. One of them was always kept open because along the way, maybe at a station, there might be some mail that would be picked up or some mail that might have to be let off. And so they always kept one of the canisters kept one of the canisters opened so that they could deliver and retrieve mail. And this is a letter. This is a letter. It's ½ ounce paid from St. Joseph to Placerville per Pony Express, as you can see. And a ½ ounce letter cost $5 on the Pony Express. Now you have to understand, we're talking 1860, 1861 money. So $5 there would be the equivalent of about $125 in today's money. So how many people would want to pay $125 to send a letter through the Pony Express? Now, eventually, towards the end of the Pony Express, it was reduced down to $1. But as you notice here, you still had to pay US postage because it was considered a letter. And so you had to pay the postage, which in this case was 10 cents. But you also had to pay for, the ½ ounce, the postage for the Pony Express. To give you an idea, ½ ounce is approximately 1 sheet of toilet paper. So if you got a sheet of toilet paper, it was approximately ½ ounce, and try writing a letter on half a sheet of toilet paper. So you really couldn't really write a lot, and you couldn't, so you couldn't really say what was going on at the time. And, it was very expensive, very expensive. Now, I put this one up because I wanted to show you it. This left Sacramento on January 7th. It arrived at St. Joseph, Missouri, and may be kind of hard, but this is January 25th. Okay. Well, that's 18 days. And I said that the average was 10 days. But you have to remember, we're talking January. This letter had to go through the Sierra Nevada mountains and through the Rocky Mountains in the middle of winter. And so for them to be able to get this letter from one location to the other in 18 days is probably pretty phenomenal. So, because obviously there was no Interstate 80 to travel over. They had to make their own way through the mountains. And, this was pretty remarkable that they made it in that length of time. Okay, so here we go. We're all set. April 3rd, 1860. This is supposed to be St. Joseph, Missouri. There is the Pony Express rider in his blue jeans, which didn't get invented until about 1866, 1867. So how could he be wearing blue jeans? A red shirt with a yellow bandana, as I'm wearing, which if you were out at the time of this, especially in the western part of the United States, you had the Paiute Indian War going on. So why would you wear a red shirt in the middle of that, particular hostility? It would be like putting a bullseye on your back and saying, shoot me. So this is really not what a Pony Express rider would wear. The other thing that's interesting is it looks like there's this huge crowd and they're leaving in the middle of the day and all that. Well, on April 3rd, especially from St. Joseph, Missouri, they didn't leave until 7:30 at night. It was a dark night. The crowd that had assembled there had all left, and the rider basically rode off on his own. And so this whole picture is totally wrong. It's one of the many myths of the Pony Express, and I'm going to tell you a few more myths as we get a little farther along. Here's what a Pony Express rider wore. Basically, they wore whatever they had. So as you can see, you're probably going to be pretty confident to say those aren't red shirts. So that's what a Pony Express rider would be wearing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into some of the, primarily Nevada. And when we look at Nevada, here it is. Now, this shows 29 stations, but many of the experts say there was between 28 and 30 stations. And the reason for that was that some stations started right near the end of the Pony Express, and some stations were close enough to each other that one of the stations went away. So even though they show 29 stations here, and this starts here at State Line, with Friday Station, which is number 1, and goes all the way to the Utah border, which is Deep Creek Station, which is number 29. But it's somewhere between 28 and 30 stations in the Pony Express here in Nevada. And again, here in Nevada, they were anywhere between 15 to 35 miles apart. And it was where there was water, maybe some good grass, where the horses could, get some good grass. Although one of the things that majors insisted was that the horses be fed the best grain possible and the best feed possible. And the idea was because they wanted their horses to be, physically fit to be able to outrun anything and anybody, which was important, especially in the West here, and especially in Nevada, because at this time is the Paiute Indian War. And so the Native Americans, the Paiutes and Shoshone, and their horses could never outrun a Pony Express horse. So they resorted to stealing them, which you'll see a little later. Okay. And here's one, Fort Churchill. Many of you may be familiar with Fort Churchill. Fort Churchill is about 45 miles from Reno. It is now a state park, but it was at one time a Pony Express station in 1860. The fort was built in 1860, and it has an interesting story because it was built at a cost of about $50,000, which at the time was just astronomical price to build a fort. It had all the modern features. It actually had a full-time hospital with 2 surgeons, 2 Army surgeons, and that was another thing that was never heard of, because many posts were lucky if they had 1 doctor or 1 surgeon, and Fort Churchill had 2 of them. And again, the cost was about $50,000, which would be several $1,000,000 in today's money. These are the officers' quarters. Officers' quarters were 2 stories. As you can see here, it's in kind of bad shape. This is what we call arrested decay, because all the wood, or most all the wood, is gone. And I will talk about that in a little bit. And so consequently, this is adobe. Adobe is nothing more than mud bricks, and weathering will eventually, unless it's arrested like this, it will actually do away with the fort itself. And there are not that many structures there if you've been there. This is the headquarters office. This is the Pony Express station where the rider would change his horses. This is also later on where the telegraph came in, which basically did away with the Pony Express. But this is their headquarters building and the duty station where the Pony Express would change. And this is one of those that you can visit. I mean, you're perfectly able. There's a per day cost, but it's very minimal. And you can go and walk around the area. It's over 1,500 acres. You can see they have signs that point out to where the different locations are and what these particular structures are or were. And so you'll be able to go around and see that. Okay, and then we go to this place. This is Buckland Station. And here again, this is where we talk about the stations and why there is between 28 and 30, because Buckland Station in 1860 was a Pony Express stop. However, as you know, when Fort Churchill was built, then it took over for Buckland Station. And so some people consider that 2 stations. I consider it as just 1, and it's just been moved. This is Buckland Station back then. This is Buckland Station now. Buckland Station is also a state park. You can visit it. It's right along the Carson River. It's on highway, I think it's 95 alternate. And you can see, you can go in there. Now, the reason I mentioned this is in the Fort Churchill was started in 1860. In 1869, it was abandoned. In 1869, the fort was put up for auction, and Sam Buckland bought the fort for $750. Again, the fort was built for $50,000. It was sold for $750. Sam Buckland did not want the fort. He was not going to live in the fort. He wanted all the wood, because what he did was he built this structure. And all the windows, if you look at these windows are all windows that came from the fort. The staircase that's in there came from one of the officers' quarters. And you can actually stop here and visit. And you can go in there. There is a ranger on duty that can explain to you the different rooms and what was done. this changed hands several times and eventually became part of the Nevada park system. Here's another one. You say, well, wait a minute. This is Carson Sink, but there's nothing there except this sign. Because again, this was another one of those adobe stations. And over time, you can see that Mother Nature, over the course of 160 years, Mother Nature has reclaimed it. So all that's there is a sign that said this is where the Pony Express station was. But it's visible. It's visible. It's between Silver Springs and the Fallon Cutoff, and it's visible there. This is one of my favorites. This is Sand Springs, and you can tell it's Sand Springs because in the background here, there's Sand Mountain. Now, here's the interesting thing about Sand Springs. Sand Springs, as you can see, was just rocks. There's, if you look around, if you've ever gone out there, and if you've been to Sand Mountain, this is located right in front of Sand Mountain. And there's just a little small sign that says Sand Springs Pony Express Station. And you would turn left and you go on a road and pretty much it dead ends. And then you have to walk maybe 2 or 3 blocks to the Pony Express station. But this is one of the very, it's well preserved. But there's no wood around. So the thing is this was one of those that, because there was no wood, there wasn't a roof. The roof were things like cow hides and things like that were put over in the winter to kind of protect you against the elements. In the summer, you probably didn't need it because it was hot there all the time. Once upon a time, there was a spring that went through there. The spring is no longer there. You can't find it, but that's one of the reasons that this station was there, was because there was actually a spring of water that was actually, it was kind of brackish, but it was acceptable. Now, it's interesting because in the University of Nevada did an excavation dig of this because they knew there was a station here, but they didn't know exactly where. And so when the university came in, they basically excavated this. And I'm going to show you a better picture. Here's an aerial shot of it. They excavated that because it was buried under the sand of Sand Mountain. And when Sand Mountain moved up the hill, it pretty much exposed this. And the other thing they found was remember, when you did the oath, you said that you would not drink intoxicating liquors. Well, when they excavated this, they found quite a few broken whiskey bottles. And, so there goes that theory out the window. Okay, these 3 places here and this area and here, this is the living area where the pointer is. This is the living area. This is the tack, saddle, and storeroom. So any food supplies would be in here, saddles, tack, bridles, that kind of thing was there. And this was the corral for the horses. And so this is a nice aerial drone view of Sand Springs. And it's located about, it's on Highway 50 outside of Fallon, heading east. And, once you get to Sand Mountain, once you see Sand Mountain and you see the turn for Sand Mountain, you can't miss, this is easy. This is the walkway. There's a path that comes in through this way. This is the path. And it's, like I say, it's about 2-3 blocks from where you have to park your car. But it's pretty well preserved. Okay. About 35 miles down the road from Sand Springs is Cold Springs. And this is an interesting one. Again, this is located just off Highway 50. It's right close to Highway 50. And you can't really miss it. But this was these walls here, you can't really tell. These walls were as high as 7 feet tall. And they were about 2 to 3 feet thick. And the reason was where Cold Springs was kind of the unofficial boundary line between the Shoshone and the Paiute tribes. Now, you know, they never really had a specific line that they drew and said, okay, this is your territory, this is our other territory. You know, this is the Paiute territory, this is the Shoshone. But about where Cold Springs is located is the boundary of the two tribes. And the reason I say that is because this Pony Express station was attacked several times by both Paiute and Shoshone tribes during and after the Paiute Indian War. And here's another view of this. This kind of gives you a little better view. They had holes for gun ports along the wall, but you can kind of see that this is at least 2 to 3 feet thick. This is another one of those well-preserved stations. Again, no roof because there was no wood. There's really no wood in the area. So some of it went roofless, and sometimes what they would do is in the living area, somebody would just curl up with whatever they had to keep away from the elements. Okay. Another one that you can, I say you can see it. Well, this is Ruby Valley. This is the Ruby Valley station. And this has got an interesting story because this is one of the few that was made out of wood. And it's interesting because Native Americans, when they attacked, they would attack and burn a Pony Express station, which is kind of interesting because I didn't know rocks would burn that well. Because this was attacked and burned. How do you burn rocks? It's kind of tough. But they would, I guess, destroy, some of this, and then it'd have to go in and be rebuilt. But anyway, this is the Ruby Valley station, and it was never touched. It was never burned. And the reason being was, and there were a lot of Shoshone tribes, Shoshone groups that came around this thing. But the thing is in the winter, any extra food that the Pony Express station had, the station master would give it to the Native Americans. And because he did that, the standing rule was, this is a good person, so don't destroy the Pony Express station. And so they never did. And as a matter of fact, it was picked up and relocated. And here it is, relocated. This is in front of the Elko County Museum in downtown Elko. So when you go to Elko, you can actually see this Pony Express station. You can go inside and see how the people lived. I mean, this is only big enough for 2, possibly 3 people. You'll see the fireplace. Here's this fireplace here. And here's the fireplace here. So basically it was just basically picked up, moved kind of, but left in its pretty much original state. And so consequently, this is how it was. And it's visited. You can visit this. This is what's really nice about this. Oh, before I get to him, there is a couple other ones. There's one particular station that right now there's nothing left of it, but it's kind of my favorite, and it has a very interesting story in the fact that it's Egan Canyon Station. And the thing about Egan Canyon Station was it's something that you could do. You can make a Hollywood movie out of. And what had happened was, a group of Shoshone, about 80 Native Americans, descended on this station. And there was just the station master and one rider that was there. And the rider, they were there, and here they were, here comes these 80 Shoshone and they came there. They stood a little bit out, they were just kind of out of rifle range. And so the station master and the other rider in there basically were shooting at them, but never hit anybody until they ran out of ammunition. And once they ran out of ammunition, the Native Americans came in, ordered the station master and the rider to cook them food. And basically they took all the food that was in there. After they did that, they took them out, tied them to wagon wheels. There was a wagon there. They tied them to the wagon wheels and started piling up sagebrush around them because they were going to basically kind of burn them at the stake. Now, while, the shooting and the food, the eating of the food and all that stuff was going on, the Pony Express rider that was supposed to be showing up there happened to come over this ridge, saw what was going on, turned around and rode back, and happened to run into a cavalry squad of soldiers led by a lieutenant by the name of Stephen Weed, W-E-E-D, Weed. And they told him basically what they had, and they had like about 20 troops. And so Lieutenant Weed decides he's going to pull an ambush on these Native Americans. And so basically started to encircle the Pony Express station with his 20 men. And just as they were about to light the sagebrush to burn these people up, they came charging out of the hills, just like in the movie, in the nick of time. They killed about 15 to 20 of the Native Americans, then drove the rest of them off, and saved the two riders, or saved the station master and the rider in the nick of time, as we all say. And so consequently, however, after the Pony Express, after the Stephen Weed and his troops left, a couple months later, the same chief came by. His name was Leatherhead, Chief Leatherhead. And they basically burned down the station and killed the two people that were in there. So, didn't get saved that time. Anyway, okay, I show you this guy. And this is an interesting character. His name is Bronco Billy Miller. And Bronco Billy Miller is considered to be the youngest of the Pony Express riders. Now, you wouldn't guess it, but this is at his 100th birthday. He was born in 1850, and he is the youngest of the riders. Again, he became a Pony Express rider at age 10. And the story goes that he was in Placerville with his father when a horse came in, a horseless rider came in from the Pony Express, and they couldn't find another rider. And the story is that Bronco Billy said, "I'll do it." And so he rode the next leg of the journey. And a Pony Express rider didn't ride, obviously, the whole 2,000 miles. Each rider rode between 50 and 75 miles, and then a new rider would take over. And so he rode this person's leg, the 50 or 75 miles, and they were impressed by his horsemanship, so they made him a Pony Express rider. So at age 10, he was the youngest Pony Express rider. He never did make it into Nevada, but he did ride for the Pony Express for several years. He did ride for several years. It's interesting because in 1931, on his 70th birthday, or at the age of 81, on the 70th anniversary of the Pony Express, he rode a horse, one of the legs of the Pony Express at age 81. In 1914, he tried to get into World War I. They wouldn't put him in here, so he went to Canada and tried to get in World War I. He lied about his age. He said that he was 44 years old when in fact he was 67. And at age 92, he tried to get into World War II with the United States, and they said, no, sorry, you're too old. So he went around the country and sold war bonds. He died on January 15th, 1955 at the age of 105. This is his 100th birthday, and this is a jacket that was given to him on his 100th birthday. I have this guy, this next person. This is Pony Bob Haslam. Pony Bob Haslam is the most famous of the Pony Express riders. He made the longest ride of Pony Express. He did it all in Nevada. He went 380 miles in 36 hours. He started out at his route was basically from State Line, Friday Station, down to Reed Station, which was down the hill. But the thing is that he started his ride in 1860, gets down to Reed Station. There's no horses and nobody, basically, because the horses were all commandeered by people that were going to fight in the First Pyramid Lake Indian War. So he continues on. The next place is Buckland Station. He gets there, and again, he says, this is it, I'm through. And they said, well, sorry, there's no horses here. And the Pony Express rider that was supposed to ride the next leg was scared and refused to ride. So there happened to be a superintendent there and said, hey, listen, we'll give you, see, a Pony Express rider made $100 a month. And he said, we'll give you an extra $50 as a bonus if you ride until, somebody will take over for you. He said, sure. So he continued on. He passed Carson Sink. He passed Sand Springs. He passed Cold Springs. He finally got to he was 190 miles out. And after that, he finally found another rider that would take the route. He rested a few hours until the other person coming from the east gave him the pouch. And so he started back, comes to Cold Springs. Cold Springs had been attacked, and the station master and the other people that were in there were killed. He gets to Sand Springs. Sand Springs, he tells the station master to get out of there because there's a raiding party that had just destroyed Cold Springs. He continues on through back through Carson Sink, back through Buckland Station, Reed Station, through Genoa, and ends up back at State Line at Friday Station. He had traveled 380 miles in 36 hours and basically was only about 4 hours behind schedule, and basically had time to rest at any places and eat anywhere. So he is credited with the absolute longest run of the Pony Express. Became a hero. Now there is another person, Buffalo Bill Cody, who at age 14 was also a Pony Express rider. He made a long ride too, but it wasn't as long as Pony Bob here. However, as he kept, as Buffalo Bill kept talking, every time he told the story, the ride got longer and the time got shorter. But it's verified that he made about 300 miles and no more. So Pony Bob still holds the record. Now, I was talking about myths. Here it is. Orphans preferred, young skinny fellows, not over 18. Again, we had Pony Express riders as young as 10 or 11 years old, all the way up to 44, 45 years old. It was not orphans preferred. This was put in the 75th anniversary. It was put in a window at St. Joseph, Missouri. This is one of the large myths that of the Pony Express. And so it became the fact that, hey, orphans were preferred because obviously if they got killed, nobody would care about them. But that wasn't the case. And there are other myths. And my favorite myth is the fact that the Pony Express invented the donut. Now, the donut was around in the 1600s. The Pony Express did not invent the donut. The story was that there was a guy by the name of Johnny Frey, and his girlfriend would make him these sweet pastries. And the problem was that he was one of the riders, and he was in the East, so he rode on a thoroughbred, so he was going pretty fast. And she would throw these pastries to him, and sometimes he'd catch them, sometimes he'd miss them. But he liked them so much that he basically had her make a pastry, told her, make a pastry and leave the center hole open. And so she made the pastry, left the center hole open, and as he ran by, he would hold out his pistol and would catch the pastry over the barrel of the pistol. And that is how the donut was invented. Nice story, but never happened. But those are good stories, That's one of the things. Instead, this is what actually was. This was in the Utah paper at Salt Lake City, and it said the undersigned wishes to hire 10 or a dozen men familiar with management of horses as hostlers or riders on the Overland Express route. And that's what it was called. It was called the Overland Express route, even though we considered it the Pony Express. Via Salt Lake City, wages $50 per month and found. I can be found at St. George Hotel Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. William Finney. This is an actual ad for Pony Express riders or station masters. But, as anything else, and here's some Nevada facts. There's 429 miles of Pony Express route through Nevada. Only 20 miles of it is on private property. The rest is accessible. In May 1860, the Pony Express was disrupted for about 6 weeks due to the Paiute Indian War or the Pyramid Lake Indian War, whichever you prefer. During its time, Native Americans burned 7 Pony Express stations, killed 16 people, and stole 150 horses. And the Native American destruction in Nevada cost the Pony Express an extra $75,000 for men, stations, horses, feed, and all the supplies, saddles, tack, and all the other things, which today would be about $2 million. But as in anything else, the Pony Express went away. It was because of the telegraph. The telegraph was started being strung up around the same time the Pony Express started. And so consequently, it could get messages from one end of the country to the other end of the country in minutes as opposed to days. However, just some statistics, the Pony Express totaled about 616,000 miles and had about 330 runs each way. It carried somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 pieces of mail. 23,000 of them originated in San Francisco or Sacramento. And the problem was, and some of the costs, I should say, expenses were about $1,000 a day. And we're talking 1860 funds, so this is quite a bit of money. Cost of equipment was about $100,000. Maintenance of operation was about $480,000. Damages, again, I mentioned that on the previous slide, mostly in Nevada, $75,000. And miscellaneous expenses were about $45,000. So the company lost basically between $500,000 and $700,000 in 1860 funds, which in today's money would be somewhere between 13 and $18 million. And so basically it bankrupted the company, and Wells Fargo got the mail claim. So all those things put an end to the Pony Express. And there was a thing in the Sacramento Bee, an article, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of that. It says, "Farewell, our faithful little friend. The pony is to run no more. Farewell, thou staunch wilderness overcoming swift-footed messenger. For the good thou hast done, we praise thee. Rest upon your honors, be satisfied with them. Your destiny has been fulfilled. Rest then in peace, for thou hast run the race, thou hast followed the course, thou hast done the work that was given to you to do." And with that, I am at the end. So now, if anyone has any questions, I would be more than glad to answer them as best I can.
Let me see. Oh, Jill Richardson asked, how can they ride in the dark? It seems awfully dangerous. And I was wondering the same thing.
They did. They ran 24 hours a day, and you hoped that there was a full moon. And it was funny because eventually over time, horses knew their route, and a horse knew from which station it was going to. And then when it turned around, it knew which station it had come from. And horses would make it from station to station. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a quick story. There was a Pony Express rider by the name of Billy Tate, who was a 14-year-old boy. And he was a Pony Express rider in Elko County. And he was attacked by a war party. And nobody knows exactly quite how many there were. They knew there were quite a few. And basically what he did was he jumped off his horse and barricaded himself and sent the horse on. And the horse made it to the next station riderless. And so then, the station master then backtracked, and basically they found him deceased, but in his wake, in front of where he barricaded himself, there were 8 dead Native Americans, and nobody knows how many, may have been wounded, because again, remember I said they kept 1 loaded pistol and an extra loaded cylinder. So he was able to get off 12 shots.
Oh, wow.
So, but the horse made it back to its station. So the horses knew over time where they were going, and they could ride at night. Maybe not quite as fast as they would during the day, at full speed, but they were able to do it. Because even Pony Bob traveled at night, and the horse knew where it was going. So, yeah.
So then I guess to follow up on that question, so each station had a certain number of horses that kind of rode to, maybe a couple stations, and then they would then go back the other way kind of thing?
Exactly. There was only so many horses at each station. And so that was it. It wasn't like one horse made 2,000 miles. The most they would do was between 50 and 75 miles. So that might be 3 or 4 stations, depending on where you were. And then a new rider and a new horse would start from there to the next station.
Okay. We have Jim Phelan, he's watching the program, and he says he's a rider for the Nevada Division Pony Express Re-Ride, and they currently do a re-ride every year. I knew that, I wasn't sure if they would do it every so many years, and he says he uses an Arabian mare for his re-ride, which I think is kind of cool.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and you might ask Jim this question, generally they don't do 50 to 75 miles. They generally do less than that. And so consequently, an Arabian was the horse, but the horse of preference was the Spanish Barb in the West because it was an endurance horse. Smaller horse, more endurance.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got another question here from Lorraine. She said Sand Spring Station. Was it a stagecoach stop too? And so that's part one. Was the station keepers sworn not to drink alcohol?
Yes, if you wanted to be a Pony
Okay.
Express rider or station, an employee of Waddell, Russell Majors and Waddell, you agreed to not use profane language
Oh,
or
okay.
drink intoxicating liquors. And so when they excavated Sand Springs, they found a bunch of broken whiskey bottles. So, come on.
You heard that part.
Now, the other thing is, yes, and here's the thing. Yes, you did have a stagecoach line. And I'm going to go back a few slides. If you notice here, there's just a star, a black star, meant that it was a original Pony Express station. An open star said it was a Pony Express station and a low overland stage office. So here's one here, number 8, which is Hooten Wells. Here's another one, number 13, which is Dry Well. Here's another one. So these, to answer Lorraine's question, yes, they doubled as both. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stations that were both overland stage and a Pony Express station. So they doubled.
So then I guess a follow-up that I have is that then those stations would have continued on doing what they already were doing once the short period of time from the Pony Express is that they were still stagecoach stops, regardless of Pony Express,
yes.
Right?
Yes, and because what happened was eventually Wells Fargo took those routes because Wells Fargo got the mail contract from the federal government, and so those stations were stops along the way with Wells Fargo. And like you see in the movies, they throw the mail sack in the back of the way and the stagecoach, and then they would move it along. Yeah, that was the same kind of thing. So yes.
Can you remind us again who Bully Billy?
Bronco Billy Miller.
Which one was it again?
Bronco Billy Miller, the guy that was 105 years old.
Yes, Bronco. Okay, thank you.
Bronco Billy Miller. He's an interesting guy because I've read a couple of things. I just did a very small biography of him, but supposedly he came over in on a wagon train, and it was at the time. See, he was in the Placerville area, which with his family, which would put it at the time of the gold rush, the 49ers and the gold rush. And so consequently, that's probably what he was doing there. Well, I mean, he was there with his family. And when this riderless horse came in, he had been around horses apparently as a young, even younger than that, and said he would ride. And they were impressed and put him on as a full-time rider. So
that's pretty awesome. Miriam Minnis asks, let's see, how long do you think it would take to drive by car to retrace this route through Nevada, kind of doing a field trip, maybe do some exploring with their grandkids? Because you said only about, 20 miles,
20 miles.
Is on private property. So, it's a long kind of Highway 50. Is it something that people could kind of travel along?
I'm looking for a book here. Oh, here it is. I don't know if you can see this. There's a book called Pony Express in Nevada, and it's put out by Nevada Bureau of Land Management.
Okay.
And it lists all of the stations and how to get to them. Some of these, now here's the thing, some of these are right on Highway 50.
Right.
Some of these are like, as a matter of fact, the very first one, Friday Station's right at State Line, but it's sitting on private property.
Okay.
Now you go into Genoa, and you're right in Genoa, you're right in Carson City, you're right in Dayton. then those just have plaques that say, here's where the Pony Express station was. Now, when you get out of there and you start heading towards, like Miller's and Reed Station basically I mean, some of those are completely gone, and all there might be is just a plaque there that says this is where the station was. Some of them are off the beaten path, and it takes a 4-wheel drive to get to them.
Oh, okay.
So you really couldn't do it by car, but if you followed, most of Highway 50 is, well, see, basically once you get out of Austin, then it tends to, you can kind of get a picture, because here's Highway 50, and then here's where it tends to go. And it is right in between 80. 80 would be up here
I was
someplace.
gonna say between
And,
80.
and 50
Okay.
is down here, so it's in between.
Okay.
But I mean, you go to the Elko station, you go to Elko, and you can go to the museum, and not only is there a lot of neat stuff in the museum, but you can walk in and look in the Pony Express station that's sitting there.
Well, it's same
some
as
of
the
these-
Sand Springs too, because you can see
Yeah.
the amazing
Right.
sand hills, but it's literally at the beginning of the turn off to Sand Mountain. It's right there, so you could
Yeah.
literally drive to it. So
Yeah, you can drive. Yeah, you drive within a couple blocks, about 3 or 4 blocks, and then you have to walk 3 or 4 blocks, but it's no big deal. Same thing with Cold Springs. Cold Springs, you can see it right from the highway. I mean, it's right there. It's pretty huge. Because there was
Can you-
what's
I was gonna say, can you say what the Pony Express book, who was the author again for the book?
it's called The Pony Express in Nevada, and it's compiled by the Nevada Bureau of Land Management.
Okay.
This
All right.
one that I have was published by Harrah's, but I think you can get one through, Nevada Bureau of Land Management.
And I think I've seen that. I know we've got some Pony Express books, and it kind of looks something similar that we might have in our gift shop.
Yeah,
as
you
well.
you probably have the newer book. This is the older.
Yeah, I think we do. So
This is the
Okay.
1976 version. I'm sure you have the newer version.
yeah, I think so. But that was one of the questions, so I just wanted to make
And
sure.
and some of them are, some of them there's nothing left. Like here, Shell Creek. Now you can get to Shell Creek. I have actually been to Shell Creek. And Shell Creek, because it's the town of Shelbourne. Well, the town of Shelbourne is nothing more than a gas station right now. And all there is a plaque. And the plaque says, here's where the Pony Express station was. Because Shelbourne had several lives. It was a Pony Express station. It was also a fort, if you want to call it that. There were troops stationed there for a while because of the problems with the Shoshone. And it was a gold camp. They discovered gold there, and so for a while it was a mining town, and had a gold rush there. So it had 3 lives.
Okay.
And the same thing with Austin. Austin is interesting because Austin was a Pony Express station first, and the Pony Express rider happened to go out in the hills, and he was gathering firewood, and he sees these rocks. And says, boy, this looks pretty interesting. Well, it turned out it was silver. And the next thing you know, Austin turns into basically one of the largest cities in Nevada in the 1860s. It had 10,000 plus people in it at one time. And it's originally because of the Pony Express.
Well, and wasn't it was already kind of a stage route and
Yeah.
and all through there anyway.
Well-
So we do have a question.
Okay.
Well, there's 2 actually. They wanted to know what happened to the horses after Pony Express stations kind of ended. You said that some of these were stage stops, but do you know anything what happened to those? And then the other was there ever families living at these stations, or were they only manned really by single men?
Good. That's an excellent question. I didn't bring that up. In the East, they could bring their families. East of the Rockies, they could have their family there. So the station master would have his whole family there. And, it was okay. It could be married, have his family. In the West, because it was such rough and basically rugged terrain, they discouraged it. Now, Salt Lake City is a different story, because Salt Lake City, which is off the map, obviously, was a Pony Express station too. Well, obviously Salt Lake City, would be a family town. It was a large town at the time. But, you know, I mean, most of these towns here were out in the middle. I mean, it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was nothing there. And so consequently, you know, you didn't want to bring, you know, and plus the fact, again, it's funny, the whole history of the Pony Express through Nevada, you had the Paiute Indian War or Pyramid Lake Indian War, whichever you prefer. And then you had Shoshone raids and plus Paiute raids through the whole year and a half that the Pony Express was in existence. You didn't want your family there. So you didn't bring them, you know. Now the station masters actually made a little more money. The Pony Express rider made $100 a month. The station master made $150 a month. But again, he had to be on his toes. He had to stay there permanently. He couldn't go anyplace. You know, he had to stay there because they had to wait for the riders to come in and, you know, make sure they could change it. An interesting fact that, you know, just for everybody's interest there, some riders were so good that they could jump off one horse, take the mochila with them, throw it on the other horse, and be on the road riding hard in 30 seconds. They were allotted 3 minutes between horse change and mochila change. You know, take the mochila off of the horse, put it on the other horse, get on it, and they allowed them 3 minutes. But some of them were so good that they could throw it off of one horse, throw it on the other horse, and be on the road in 30 seconds. It's just, it's crazy, you know. Again,
you'd be eating and riding, I think.
Well, yeah, but you know, those guys had donuts. Remember, they had donuts.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You know, that's one of the funniest stories. There's another one. I have a kid's textbook that I use, and the children's textbook talks about, it's called it's called Buffalo Bill and the Pony Express.
Oh, okay.
Because Buffalo Bill rode for the Pony Express. And in one of the episodes, it says an arrow whished by his head and he turned around. Yikes, the Paiutes were after him. Now, Buffalo Bill Cody rode in Nebraska.
Okay.
Now, we know for a fact there were no Paiutes in Nebraska. They were in Nevada. But I guess since it's NE and we're NV, that's close enough. You know, but see, this is why there's a lot of, you know, there's a really good book called Orphans Preferred. And that's a book about the Pony Express. And he, in the book, they kind of debunk some of the myths, like the guy here on my background, you know, in the middle of the day with all these people and all this kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, the reporter that was supposed to cover that had left. He went home because it was dark, and they didn't even know what color horse the person was on. They just knew the person left St. Joseph, Missouri. They don't know where he left from. They don't know what the color of the horse was. They don't know, you know, much. They don't even know which. There were two different riders. There was a Richardson and a Frey. And Johnny Frey's the one character, you know, that made with the donuts. But the other guy was Richardson. And they don't know which one of the two riders even left St. Joseph, Missouri. So they don't even know who the original riders were.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know, so yeah. The thing was, they think it might have been Richardson because Richardson made the return route and came back into St. Joseph coming back the other way. So they figured, well, he must be the guy. But there's many that say, no, it was Johnny Frey. So who knows?
Jim Phelan had commented that there's many sections in Nevada that people can watch the re-ride coming through, and they do ride day and night and make the re-ride in 10 days, but they definitely don't ride the 70 miles. And they do ride day and night and ride pretty fast. So I asked if there's a website or something if people want to learn more about the re-ride. Isn't there a Pony Express group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is all the questions that we have. Is there anything else you would like to let us know, Sam? You gave us a lot of great stories and a lot of great information, and we so appreciate your talk today.
Yeah, no, I really don't. I mean, you know, it's really interesting. Like I say, I kind of got interested in this, and there's a National Geographic that talks about that. There's several books. Like I said, I liked Orphans Preferred because I think it tells a little more. It's interesting because of the three guys, and I'll tell you real quick. Russell, Majors, and Waddell. Russell and Waddell died pretty young. They died in 1872. Matter of fact, Russell, they almost put him in jail for a scandal because he did a bunch of shady things, trying to get money and everything else, and never paid it back, and they almost threw him in jail for that. Waddell, he sold what he had and paid what creditors he had, but he ended up penniless and ended up living with his family, with his daughter, when he died. Now, the other one, Majors lived to 1900. And in his 70s, he decided to write a memoir of his experience with the Pony Express. And the interesting thing is, Majors was able to sell all the assets he had. He never got back into the freighting business, but he sold everything. And I would imagine that meant the horses too, because he had to pay all the creditors back, and he did. He was able to pay everybody back, so he had a clean slate. In his 70s, he decided to write his memoirs about his adventures with the Pony Express, and he had Buffalo Bill Cody and a dime novelist help him. And so some of the things that are there are kind of embellished, you might say. So, you know, his memoirs you kind of take with a grain of salt because, yeah, there's some of it's probably true, but some of it was probably helped along by Buffalo Bill Cody and this dime novelist that helped write the memoirs. But that's what happened to the three guys. I mean, they ended up penniless, basically.
I want to thank you, Sam, and Neal, of course, as always, for finding us wonderful speakers to give us great topics for this. And so I want to thank the Washoe County Library, as always, for helping us give these presentations and make these available. So I'll turn it back to Samantha.
Hello, everyone. I would like to point out that we do have Sam's books that he's talking about. The Nevada Pony Express is available to place on hold at our library. We did open some of our branches for the grab and go this week. There are 5 branches that are open. So if you go on our website, you are more than welcome to place that on hold. And thanks for joining us today.